And welcome to Two Gray Goatees and a Whistle. I'm your host, Coach Huddy. Today I'm joined with my beautiful wife, the coach's wife. Amanda's here.
Hello.
And our special guest is Coach Matt Harr. He's a published author, by the way. Got his book right here. So been checking it out, enjoying it very much. Somebody who's got a lot of experience in the business of coaching and athletics, and had a very particular social media post that came out not too long ago that we will talk about a little bit later that kind of sums up something, especially relationships with wives and coaches and what they deal with. So, Matt, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, usually, how I like to start these shows up, I like a little bit of athletic background, kind of what got you into the sports at a younger age, and then we'll work into how you got into coaching, and then we'll get into more of the meat potatoes of the stuff going on. So, first thing I'd like to know is growing up, what were some of the sports that you were doing at a young age?
I did all of them that I could, really. It was basketball, baseball, football. I think I even was on a bowling team and wrestling. I mean, my dad had me involved with everything. So we were always going around doing something just to keep me busy. And my sisters were the same way. My parents weren't very athletic, but they were just involved.
It always helps. Is there a certain sport that kind of had more of an impact on you maybe than others? And what would be that reason if you can elaborate maybe on that?
I don't, it just depended on the season. I really enjoyed baseball growing up, and then I moved to basketball. But at a young age, I guess the best one I did was wrestling, just because back then, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I don't want to sound like a bully or anything, but we got in a lot of fights, and, the wrestling side of things kind of helped take care of that. And I don't, it's hard to say that without acting like, because I wasn't very big. So my dad got me into wrestling, not because of fighting, just because it was something to do. And I think I developed a lot of skills from that too, that helped me in the other sports. But wrestling and then baseball and basketball were my two main sports, pretty much.
Is there any particular memory that maybe in your playing days that kind of sticks with you that might have had maybe a bigger impact, a certain game, or just what's something that really stuck with you as far as that maybe had maybe more of an impact in who you became as you are now growing up, whether it be little league or through high school?
Well, I think it was, I don't know, it changed with Little League. I was always pretty decent in baseball and in basketball. And I think the wake up moment, at least when I was younger, was when I didn't start my freshman year at a junior high. We called them junior highs back then, or middle schools now, but it was hard on me. And I just I just remember that times saying, "Hey, I got to get better." And I did, and it worked out that after that freshman year, I started my sophomore year in basketball and junior, senior year too. And I think that moment really sticks in my head. And then there was probably more defining moments. And I don't know if you want to get into, when I went on to college, in college athletics, I played baseball in college and then in the minor leagues too. So there was a lot more aha moments, so to say, in those sports and that time of my life. It was just when you're younger, it's just kind of you just go to the games and you have fun, and it was later in life when things started to really click for me.
Yeah, and I probably should have said, get brought up your college experience and stuff like that too. But I do want to talk about one little quick moment in your book in the beginning, because I've been reading. I got through the first few chapters. You talked about wiffle ball with your friends, and you were talking about having a stack of baseball cards, and these were. I'm assuming that you guys were simulating. This is who I was going to be when you were playing your game, and you brought up George Brett, and I remember George Brett. And so George Brett for me, my history with George Brett was the fact that my family, on my uncle's side of the family, they were friends with him through their cousin, because Buck Martinez. I don't know who that is, but Buck Martinez actually really good friends with George Brett. They play together when he was in Kansas City. But my dad
Yeah.
had opportunity. My dad had opportunity to go like fishing with him and stuff like that. One time, him and Dan Quisenberry. When you brought out George Brett, I was just like in the story. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Um, why
Yeah, that
George
was,
Brett for you? Go ahead.
well, my mom was a Yankees fan and my dad was a Dodgers fan.
Okay.
And I still remember, I can go back to the exact moment. It was 1976. Now, this pretty much dates me, but Chris Chambliss hit a home run to win the series and go to the World Series against the Royals. And I really didn't care back then. But they interviewed George Brett in the locker room. And I remember my mom saying, quit crying. He was crying. It was game 5, and they only went 5 games back then. And he was crying, and my mom was like, that guy's such a big baby. And she was all over him just because she's a Yankees fan. And I felt sorry for the guy. So I just started keeping track of him. And he ended up being one of the best, well, in my eyes, of course I'm biased, but one of the greatest players of all time. And that's how it all started. I mean, I was back in the day where it cost a quarter to call. That was right when ESPN was coming out, and you could call a phone line from your landline, obviously, and get the baseball scores that night. And I racked up some phone bills that my parents didn't know about. But once that, and I said this in my book, I was always weeding the garden or weeding the flower beds because that was always my punishment. But yeah, I still remember making those phone calls. I'd sneak downstairs and get on the phone, and times were different then. We all know that. You didn't, the news didn't cover the Royals, no radio stations. So I had to, I found out that phone number and let loose. And I've always been a George Brett fan. As a matter of fact, my son-in-law, we just went to a wedding back in Nebraska, and he was in Kansas City, and he bought me a really cool George Brett T-shirt. The old baseball card tops. It was one of his pictures on Topps baseball card. And I'm jealous that when I talk to people like you that have gone fishing with him. But I
Well,
don't know if I'd
yeah.
like to meet him. I put him on such a pedestal
Well,
that
me personally,
know if I
it
never
was
want to
my.
meet him.
I want to make this clear. It was my dad who got to do it, but it was mom. But George Brett, I like my cousins and stuff because they would they got to go to his house, I guess, before his house and stuff like that. I just remember, and I don't know if my cousins were just trying to make a flex around me, saying that, man, we're at George Brett's house and he has this yellow Lamborghini, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, well, thanks for sharing that. But I don't know if this is my cousins and they were just trying to brag that they do them. But it just when you brought him up, it just made me think about when I was younger, and growing up playing with my friends in the backyard. We'd play wiffle ball too, and we would have if it went out to the garden, it was a home run. And it was a small yard. Or if it went over they had like a playground thing, monkey gym thing, and so
Right.
we went over over the center. That was center field, and we'd always line out the players at the time. And I grew up a Blue Jays fan. So, I was like Kelly Gruber and,
Okay.
all these guys, Bell and all these guys that were playing at the time. And my buddy, they were huge Atlanta Braves fans. So, we were always going back and forth, and we do kind of the same thing you're
Right.
doing. So when you brought it up in your book, I was like, yeah, I remember doing that stuff when I was a kid. So, things, that type
Yeah,
of
it was a
stuff in
lot
your
of
book.
fun.
Yeah. So some of your
Good old
influences
days.
at a young life as a young athletic, you talked about your parents and how they always kept you and your siblings involved. Was there anybody else, any other influences in your life at that time?
It was always, when I look back, it was always my coaches. I can't say enough. I lucked out. I had 4 baseball coaches in 4 years in college, and they were all very good. They all had something different. It wasn't good playing wise and trying to get involved with a system, but it was good in learning different systems, so to speak, if that makes any sense. But I really had good coaches in high school all the way through. And I know Skip Walker at CSI was probably the toughest guy in the Northwest to play for, but he was probably the biggest influence. Him in my senior year of college, that coach, Dan McDermott in Sioux City, Iowa. That's where I went to college. Those two guys stuck out. And I hate naming guys because I always forget. My high school baseball coach, Bill Ingram, who's the field now at Twin is named after. They were all so good at pushing you, and they cared so much about what you did off the field, but they made sure you met the expectations on the field. And I can't say enough about all of them. They they all influenced me along with my
So is it safe to say your coaching when you realized you wanted to do that, was it these guys that kind of helped push you in that direction? Or what were some of the when was this realization that this is a profession I want to get into? I want to be able to coach. I want to be able to teach young men, young women,
you know I
how much I love this
I
game.
never really thought about it. Yeah, I never really thought about it until probably my sophomore year when I moved away from home and I was at Briarcliff University in Sioux City, Iowa. And it was kind of a process of elimination because I knew teachers and coaches didn't make much money. And I was like, okay, what do I want to do? But coaching and athletics was really all I knew. I didn't really want to be a doctor. I didn't think I was I, I wasn't a bad student. I was actually a pretty good student, but I wasn't good enough to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I didn't like numbers. So as a process of elimination, I said, what do you really love to do? I think somebody asked me that. And I can't remember if it was a teacher or a counselor at college. And I said, I love sports. And she said, well, get into coaching and teaching. You'd be excellent at that. And from that moment on, that was my direction. And I took full advantage of everything I learned in all my years of playing and put it to use in my coaching days. I still do.
So going into coaching, and we all have different backgrounds and how we got into it. Amanda, what's some of your first memories? What kind of got you thinking about coaching?
Having our daughter. I mean, I had really good coaches. I had, different coaches for different sports, and I was one of those kids that, there was 5 of us and we ran our parents ragged with all the things that we did. But until we had our daughter and she started getting interested in little league and, pee-wee ball and stuff like that, I hadn't really ever thought about being involved in that aspect. And then I had the opportunity to coach her a little bit in little league, and then I had the opportunity when we got into working in school districts to be able to coach middle school track and football or track and field. And I've always had a passion for track and field and for that individual sport aspect of it. And it's just kind of grown on me since then.
Yeah. So going back to you, Matt, your first coaching job, what do you remember the most about it when you got your first coaching job? What was it like for you? What were you learning? Obviously, you're new to it. What were some of the things you learned from that maybe, yeah, I wish I would have done this different or
Uh,
stuff like that?
it was different in the sense of how I got the job. I was actually still in the minor leagues and I was getting ready to go to spring training. And in Iowa, they play their baseball seasons in the summer. So they don't have a legion. And their high school seasons go from middle of May till the end of July. And a teammate of mine went to a big school in Sioux City, North High School, and he said, yeah, their coach had just unfortunately, had died from a heart attack. He was an older coach, and and at first I was a little upset with him because he goes, if you get released from the Giants, will you come out and coach the baseball team? I'm like, well, thanks for your confidence, buddy. I'm hoping I don't get released, but if I do, I will. And that's at the same time I had met my future wife, and we've been married for 35 years. And I was off to spring training, and lo and behold, I got released. And so I went back to coach in Iowa at North High School, and I loved it. But I tried to coach back then, my first year with them. I tried to coach like I played, and I was very, very competitive. And yet I learned right away that you have 15 to 18 different personalities when you coach. It doesn't matter what you're coaching. You've got to adjust accordingly. But the memory I have the most is we got a lot better that year, and we were playing the last game of the season before the district tournament. We were beating the number one team in the state by 5 runs. We were going to win the game, and I had my second best player was up to bat. First, my best player was on third base, so I thought this would be a good time to run a squeeze play, just to practice it because we're going to have to do it. Well, my hitter missed the ball, and my runner ran into him and slid, and they both broke their tibias, and they spent the night in the hospital
No.
with stitches. And boy, did I have some mad parents because I didn't have to do the squeeze play. And I think I put that in my book too. It was, and it's interesting. I hadn't talked to either one of them, man, for 40 years, maybe. And as soon as I published the book, the one called me and said, "That was not your fault." He goes, he still remembers me coming to visit him at the hospital and his dad kicking me out of the hospital room because he was so mad at me. And he goes, and he was apologizing 40 years later for his dad. And I go, well, parents care. And so that was my first coaching experience. And after that experience, I didn't know if I wanted to coach again, but I learned a lot from it. And I moved on. I'm glad I did. And I've always remembered that moment. It was just a sick feeling.
So how do you talking about, your first time coaching and how just mid-season you were realizing there had to be changes in how you approach stuff. What lessons from your early coaching days kind of helped mold you to what you see now or what you're doing now? Or how did those lessons from back then guide you to where you are today?
I think that the lessons I learned, and you don't realize it right away because I was a lot more hard nosed when I was younger. As a matter of fact, my former players come and watch me coach now, and they ask me what's wrong with me because I'm not. I still check my water bottle every now and then, and I've been known to break a few clipboards. I haven't thrown a chair yet, but I do get into the games. But I have mellowed out a lot, but not with my expectations. I think the biggest thing about coaches is you have to evolve. And when I say evolve, that means you have to change with the players coming in and over 4 generations. And that's when I speak today, that's what I speak on, whether it's at a business or a school or coaching. I just got done talking to all the athletic directors in the state at a conference last week. And you really have to adjust, unfortunately, to the change in sports right now with the kids. So the lessons I learned back then is I can't coach now the way I did back then. But what's amazing is most of the players that come back and talk to me are the ones that I was hardest on. And they are the ones that come back and say, hey, you know what? I hated you for 3 weeks during the season. But once I got into real life, I understood what you were talking about. And I still hold to that and I'll never deviate from that. I'm still going to keep the expectations high on my players, but you certainly have to evolve to the times. And for some coaches, that's hard to do. And some coaches evolve too much. They lower the standards to make everybody happy. And that's not, I don't see any successful coaches doing that.
Yeah.
If that makes
So,
sense.
it does totally make sense. And, for me starting out, it was very much, I was like, rah, let's go, wanted inspirational speeches and stuff like that. And just being around some other coaches and learning from them and stuff. And through my time, it was more of, I still have those high expectations and expect those kids to be great, not just on the field, but in the classroom, in the community, hold those standards high for them, to also understand that at least the head coach needs to be the calm one on the field. Because for me, if that coach
Right.
is losing their mind on the field, the kids are going to feel that energy and things aren't always going to go well. So, and when everything gets chaotic, being calm in those chaotic moments, to me, this one thing I think I learned through my evolution of coaching, I guess, for me, I can at least say that. Moving
Yeah.
on,
And
that
I preach that too. I mean, people judge you when, and for good reason, they judge you when the chips are down. Like you said, when everything's falling apart on the playing field, how do you react? I mean, I've seen coaches just quit, and then I've seen coaches go out of control. They coach different when things aren't going good. You have to keep that even keel about you and understand that this is life. You're teaching these kids life lessons. I mean, very few, 1%, are going to make it to well, maybe not in Gooding because you've got an NFL player.
Yeah. We got a couple of kids
uh,
actually
but
playing pro sports right now. So yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And,
Yeah.
but that's rare. And they still have to learn too in high school. I've talked to, Cam Anderson. I've met some coaches over there. I've AJ Kelsey at Wendell coached with me. I hope that they gain something like that because that's what I gained from the coaches that I've worked with too.
Right. Amanda, is there anything that from you and you first started to what you're at now? Is there anything that you've done that's kind of changed a little bit? I guess.
Well, I haven't been in the game nearly as long as you guys have. It's just really been the last, other than a little bit with our daughter growing up, just the last 10 years. And I mean, I can't say a little bit in how kids, maybe not their expectations, but their commitment to things has changed just in the last 10 to 12 years. And I know just how it was when I was a kid versus how kids are today. And being in the teaching profession, you see that too. But I liked the comment about your expectations can never change. And even when you're hard on kids, that's what they remember when they grow up and they go out into the real world and they get that dose of reality and they have that appreciation. And I've told, my athletes that, I've told my students that when they're like, man, my mom's coming down on me or whatever. And I was like, you might not appreciate it now, but you will. You will
Right.
appreciate the fact that they care.
So let's transition a little bit into that. So let's talk a little bit about what's changing in athletes. And that's something you bring up in your book. And I think we're talking about accountability, discipline, all of that. So for you, you've been in this game quite a bit in the coaching game. When were you noticing, or obviously things change, but when did you start noticing these changes in coaching, sports, athletes in general? When did you start noticing that?
I think it's probably about the turn of the century, I would say. I think that the kids, honestly, when I go back and look at my book, if I could just add a couple of additions, because now that I'm speaking and I really have to research some stuff, I, I don't believe that the kids have changed a whole lot. And the parents mean well. I just think it's the culture and the environment that they're raised in has softened. I truly believe that because you look around, a team loses, like Twin Falls loses the Canyon Ridge, and I don't mean any disrespect to parents, but the next day, had we done that when I was at Twin, we were working hard the next day. I mean, we were going all out, and it wasn't punishment. I don't like to run for punishment. I like players to buy into my program, or our program, I should say. And the problem we had now is the next day there's cookies and milk for practice because the kids feel horrible. And I think the environment's changing. And I honestly, and people will disagree a lot with me, but I think club sports have taken its toll, and it may be time to look at club sports. And I know a lot of club coaches, and a lot of them have done a good job. As a matter of fact, the 3 state championships we won at Twin, those kids played in club sports, but their parents coached them. But there's no accountability in club sports. So I think it kind of correlates with that turn of the century when it became a big thing to be on the Boise Flight or the Idaho Select or in whatever club sport it is. Volleyball's out of control.
Yeah.
But there's always another game. There is always, if they finish third place, they're happy. Or they finish. I really started to see that, and I really feel it now. Not to bash on all the club sports, but I'm just saying I've never walked into a gym and seen a banner hanging from a gymnasium wall saying we won the bronze division at Milwaukee High School Invitational Club
Right.
sports, athletic, whatever, you name it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a long answer, but I think it's around the turn of the century. I think it's the environment more than the kids have changed. The adults, when I say that, I mean adults, not just parents, coaches, communities, school teachers, principals, everything's getting a lot softer.
I think that's a
And that's
much
just my
healthier
opinion.
it's a much healthier explanation and description of that than the kids have changed. I would agree with that 100%. I think it's just easy to be like, "Well, the kids are different," but their environment is a huge, huge part of that.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I've had these conversations about club sports, and like I said, I'm not trying to bash them. Our daughter did softball and
She did
stuff like
travel
that.
ball.
She did travel ball, but you know, there's always value in some stuff like that because there is some competition stuff. But one thing that I think we're going to end up working is some of the other things outside of accountability is injuries because these kids are playing nonstop, and a lot of times they're specialized in sports, therefore putting a lot more stress on their body and all this other stuff, and then the cost itself is outrageous.
I
I
think it I think
Yeah.
it comes back to when you do this, when you either push your kids into this or allow your kids to do this or promote your kids to do this or start this for your kids, what's your end goal?
Right.
I mean, what's your goal in this whole thing?
Yeah. Right. And
And I think that's the coaches.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
look at the coaches, the coach club sport. I would like to sit down and that's an excellent point, is ask them, okay, you're going to have all these players. What is your goal for these kids as human beings, as leaders of our community in 5 years, 10 years? What is your goal? Or is your goal just to take them all over the world? And I agree with you. They can get competitive. My daughters played club volleyball, club softball. I didn't mind it, but I didn't want to fly to New York when we could go to
Right.
Salt Lake and do the same thing,
Right.
you know? So I totally agree with that. I don't think they're 100% bad at all, but the direction, and I don't want to ramble on too much, but you see it in baseball with the Boise schools. It's happened now with American Legion. They all decided to do club sports, and now the parents are starting to figure it out how much it's costing them.
Yeah.
And now the Legion program is coming back. It died there for about 3 or 4 years. And now the people are starting to understand, hey, let's just play Legion.
Yeah, there was nothing wrong with that.
And
It wasn't
Right.
broken.
yeah, it's definitely evolving for the good. What I see is the good, but there is exposure. My kid wanted to play for the Idaho Select, and we made sure the coaches were good, and he got a college scholarship in basketball, and that's one of the reasons because they can get noticed too
Yeah.
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
playing in the summer.
Right. And there's value and stuff like that. And I think if parents have those conversations, and have realistic understanding of what it takes for that kid to get there. And as long as I think they understand it's ultimately up to the athlete that's going to get there. It's not the parent because the parent could have all the drive in the world to want their
Right.
kid to get there, but the kid doesn't want to do it or they get burnout. That's a common thing that happens, you know?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I also look at with travel sports and stuff like that is that it's pricing out kids who might be just as talented, but
Yeah.
those parents, if they have a job where they're economically they can't afford it,
Well, they shouldn't have to. It
they shouldn't,
shouldn't be a necessity.
right? And so that's where your meat potatoes are going to develop in rec ball, and I think rec ball and stuff like that is extremely important,
Your little
especially for
leagues and yeah.
your little leagues stuff like that. Those are extremely important to your community because that's what's going to build your
Yeah. And one
your high
thing
school
that
programs.
what you mentioned there, it's hard on the high school coaches too,
Yes.
Yeah.
because I know we won a title in 2010, and I had to sit a kid that came through with all his buddies that played club sports. But another kid moved in and he wasn't able to play all those club sports, but he was better.
Yeah.
And the parents had a fit. But when you get to the high school level, the best players are going to play
As
in
it
my
should.
eyes. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, the best players play. Now, you could play club sports all you want, but if somebody moves in or somebody else is coming through that doesn't have the luxury of being on the club sports team because of parents or sponsors or whatever, if he's better or she's better, they're going to play in high school. And then it comes back onto the coach, and the parents don't understand it.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, money doesn't buy you talent or
Yeah.
experience.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. And a lot of people think it does.
So let's talk a little bit about the book and what your inspiration in writing this book. Back when consequences weren't optional, as the title of the book, your intended audience, I think, was me or coaches. I think too, or anybody in our generation, Generation X, in that generation for sure. You know, maybe even millennials. You know, we especially the first part of the book when I'm reading about how you were outside playing all the time and stuff like that, and doing some shady stuff, you know, finding the playboys in the
Oh,
bushes.
yeah.
So all that stuff that was
Yeah.
going on as a
That's
kid
because I
and
got kicked off
reminiscing.
the bus.
Yeah, exactly. Got kicked off the bus,
I
all
would have
that
got
stuff.
kicked off the bus.
Yeah. So, because I was like, yeah, I remember that too. And I remember being with my friends and stuff like that. You know, and I grew up in Eastern Oregon and LeGrand, and there, 12,000 people there, but we rode our bikes everywhere. We rode all around town, wanted to go fishing because the river ran right through town. You know, we would drive down to the river, go fishing, do whatever. And that was kind of our thing. And then there was a Playboy in the bush, I remember as a kid. And down the road from me where I was at, same thing. You know, one of the guys that was living in our apartment complex is like, "Hey, come with me. You know, we're going over here." And sure enough, there was like two or three
Yeah.
right there. And I don't know if somebody
Yeah.
had stolen them from a parent and that's where they're hiding them. I don't know, but yeah, stuff like that you brought up. Growing up, having to take care of yourself and the competition that happened at an age when the playground, building that competition and that start of the book, how you start talking about that. Who was your intended audience? Because I think like, yeah, this is me. So when you had this idea of putting this book together, what was your inspiration? What was the moments that led you to wanting to do this?
It kind of varied, but it's actually for coaches and parents. And it's when I have so many stories, and sometimes people think that I'm stretching the truth, but I'm really not, because some of the crazy things parents have done. I and people always told me coming up that I needed to write a book. Well, I didn't really know how to write until we have these different tools now, and Amazon, you can publish a book. It's not easy, but you can still do it without an editor and spend $1,000 and things like that. I get a lot of stories from coaches, all had about the same stories with parents, and I just kind of put those together, and raising kids. So if you're raising kids or your kids are in sports or you're coaching them, that was kind of my target audience. And especially at the end of the book, and I won't spoil it for you, but the things, it kind of closes with the things that I learned, and more, don't get too caught up in coaching that you forget about, the important things in life, like your family and your wife. I had to quit watching film after games. Like when I went home, I I just made an agreement with my wife because I got so wrapped up into coaching that we got to win Friday now because we won Wednesday, and I need to watch this film, and nobody can bug me, take care of the kids, feed them, and it was, so there's a life balance there, and that's kind of what I was headed for. So more coaches there, but the part I had the biggest problem with is I really wanted to put some parents' names in there, the ones that caused me so much stress.
Right.
The
Yeah.
people that know me, they knew who I was talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother chapter. That's probably a whole nother 10 shows
That's
for you if you other
yeah.
coaches.
Yeah. What is something from the past do you think that needs to be brought back? So you talk about how, accountability and how it was structured back then. We've talked about how the times have changed and you have to change. You have to evolve as a coach. And the old school way of coaching isn't going to work realistically. There's certain things you can't do that I remember growing up, but my coaches did that they wouldn't have a job They might actually be in jail for some of the stuff they did. And I don't mean that to be
Yeah.
like, that, just some of the stuff, some of the things that you just realistically you can't do anymore. So if there was something that's not around right now, what is something you'd like to bring back to this time? Coaching relating, I guess.
Boy, yeah, that's a good question, actually. Uh, I'm so old school that what I would like to bring back is the state tournaments and all the divisions we have. When I say divisions, like 6A, 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A, I mean, I would like to get back to maybe 4 divisions. And it's not fair to the smaller schools. I get that. But maybe it's because I'm a Hoosiers fan, going back to old school and
Right.
that movie. But I think it goes back, and I hate to keep pounding on culture, but it seems like we try to get everybody to the state tournament. So back in our day, if you made it to the state tournament, it was like, man, this is great. I mean, we beat all these teams and now we are considered one of the 8 best. I don't see that today because we have 6 divisions in basketball and football. And so the state tournament football, holy cow, we have teams that have a 3-5 record that are going to the state tournament or the state playoffs, I should say. So that's the one thing I would like to see come back. And, our gym at Twin, which I really love, is the only banners they hang are the state championship banners. And that's kind of hard nosed. And yeah, but what about when we won districts in 2018? Well, good job. That's a feather in your cap. But I would like to bring back the nostalgia or the I don't know, the stigma of getting to state, and that is like getting to the playoffs in the NFL or in baseball. They've even made baseball easier. That's for me. That's one of the things that I would like to see come back, but it's not going to
Right.
because
Right.
we
Yeah.
want
But
everybody
I mean,
to kind of have
I appreciate that. And I think there's some validity to that. Let's talk a little bit more about effective accountability. What does effective accountability look like in today's athletes?
When you effective, you mean accountability that works?
Yeah. What's accountability that works? Because we got obviously, you know, we've been in education and stuff like that. We know the struggle with holding kids accountable. How do we effectively hold these kids accountable, especially athletes today, especially when we
Well,
have
I
travel
go back
sports, stuff
to,
like that?
yeah, I think Fred Trinkle is probably the most knowledgeable. He was coach at CSI for years,
Yep.
and we were friends. And I always picked his brain. He knows more about basketball, and he is a basketball nut.
I
And he
I
always
can
told me the
honestly say,
best drill in basketball. He
yeah,
told me the best drill in basketball is the midline to the sideline. So that means the bench.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that, and I still do that. And I noticed one of your questions was what parents don't understand is they think sometimes you pull a kid out of the game because he made one mistake. But what they don't see is they don't see that whole week of practice before. And the kid does it the first trip down the floor. And I honestly believe that's holding them accountable. You're not going to play if you keep making the same mistake over and over. We're going to make mistakes. Everybody does. Coaches, refs, players, all the time. But if you're making the same mistake over and over, then somebody else deserves a shot. And that's what I tell parents. 99% of the parents that come in for a meeting, which happens all the time in coaching sports, you know that. For me, it's playing time. They may say it's not, but it usually comes down to playing time. And my best response has always been, well, this is the kid that plays behind your kid. Go talk to his parents and tell them that you want,
Their
you
kid
know,
doesn't deserve to be out
you
there
want
over
your
there
kid to
for
play
your
in front
kid.
of their kid. Why don't you choose? I'll play any of them. You guys figure it out. And I get you guys argue with yourself. Don't argue with me. I see them all week in practice.
Right.
But that accountability, I think that's part of the culture, though. You build that with the kids. And it's not all hard nosed. Sometimes you pull a kid aside in the hall at school and you say, "Hey, I got on you hard last night. I see where you're coming from," because you don't know what goes on outside the world of sports with these high school kids. A girl breaks up in it with them and it's the end of the world, or a boy breaks up with the girl and it's, there's just so much going on. And you have to keep that in mind when it comes to making tough decisions and holding them accountable, because we all have bad days. So I don't want to sound like a total jerk when I coach, but
Right.
there's a lot more positive things that happen than negative.
So, being a coach and enforcing your consequences and maintaining those relationships, you're touching on that. How do you find that balance? Making sure that there's those consequences like, man, you've turned the ball over twice going down the court. Sorry, man. I got to have you sit down and kind of get you readjusted and hopefully mentally get you in the right frame of mind. How do you maintain those
Yeah.
relationships when those kids get into that funk or whatever? How do you help keep those relationships so you don't lose those players? And then they say, I'm not buying it, coach. Sorry, see ya.
And, there's times like that probably during the season, in every season, that the kid just gets, you can see it in their face. And that usually you go to the end of the bench and you put your arm around them and say, "All right, let's relax here a little bit. And let's talk about what's going on out there. You're either trying too hard or you're lazy, depending on what you see as a coach. Or you didn't work hard in practice, or it might not even be during the game. You might have to call them in the next day before practice. But every meeting you have with the player has to be positive. If you get on them, I try to leave every locker room, not at halftime, but after a game, on a positive note, no matter what the outcome of the game is. And yeah, I got that from a college coach. My senior year, I told you, my coach in college, my senior year, I was very competitive. I was overboard. I was the captain of the baseball team, and we lost a doubleheader to our rival team across the town. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. And as a matter of fact, I was dating a girl that went to school at that school. And so that made it even worse because we were kind of friends with them. And so after the game, I went back. I go, "I'm not taking the bus back." I was so mad. I had my girlfriend take me back to the call. I got to our dorm room. I didn't turn the light on. I went right to the fridge. I grabbed a beer. And now, disclaimer, we were 19. The drinking age was 19 back then. I was
Hey,
21.
man.
So
Hey,
we weren't
there's no
breaking any
judgment here.
rules.
There's no judgment
I
here.
got a beer and it was pitch dark. It was pitch dark. And I just sat on the couch and I was so mad. And then I hear the door open. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I heard the door open and I heard somebody open the fridge and crack a beer. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be by myself. They sat down beside me and it was my head coach. He put his arm around me and he said, "Matt, you're way too competitive. You're you're always going to have these guys as friends, but you're losing the respect of your teammates. And then in life, down the road, they're not going to be your friends." And we had a good talk. And I still remember that. Every time I get mad at an assistant coach or I start to get upset with something, I got to pull myself back and say, it's not about the wins and losses. It's about the relationships. And that's stuck with me for over 35 years. That 1/2 hour of sitting in the dark, having a beer with my head coach. It was a defining moment in my coaching career.
I think that those hard moments and those coming down on a player or having that hard conversation, those are possible by those relationships we build. If we don't build those relationships prior
Exactly.
to that, there's no way those conversations are going to end well.
Right.
They're not going to get from it that you really care. It's you're just being a jerk to me, or you don't think I'm good enough versus I know you care about me and I know you care that I succeed and I know you believe in me. So I'm going to sit and listen to this and I'm going to try to be better because I know not only is that an expectation, but you truly care.
Right. Totally.
Right.
Yep.
Very
Okay.
important.
Very important. Parents and athletes. So we touched on this, and so we're going to dive just a little bit more into it. how do we get parents, and what role do parents play in shaping accountability for um, their kid? How do we help parents understand that and make them understand accountability? And how do we get them
To
to
buy into
to
it.
buy into it and do their part to hold the accountability on their end?
Well, if I knew the answer 100%, I'd write another book, and I'd
Tell you what,
probably be living
tell
on
you
a
what,
canyon
let's
edge
do that.
somewhere.
It'd be a bestseller.
That'd be a
Yeah,
bestseller right there.
because yeah, I just kind of chuckle because you have that pre-meeting or preseason meeting with the parents, and you try to explain everything, and it doesn't really matter. They care. I think that's the one thing you have to understand when you go into a parent meeting. No matter how mad I am, that I have to take time out of my day to discuss your kid's lack of effort or whatever. But the parents do care. It's their kid, and nobody wants to see their kid cry or be upset. And I get that. That's a question that I've tried to figure out many times over. You can't, not everybody's going to buy in. And it comes down to experience, basically. I can say that I've coached for 35 years, and this is why this is going to happen. One of the best things I do is before the season starts, and it seems like there's some ADs that want an evaluation system for when you make cuts. And
Mhm.
that doesn't work because you're going to have kids that really want to make the team and they're going to go all out. They just don't have the talent. And that's the hardest night of coaching when you cut kids because I meet with kids face to face, every single one of them. But I have an evaluation sheet which they evaluate each other, and they evaluate each other as a person, as a friend, as a teammate, and the last one is as a basketball player. So they evaluate all these other things and intangibles, so to speak. So when a parent comes in, I've done it a couple times. They said, my kid is everybody loves him. He's the best player on your team and you're not playing him. And he's a team player and all this. And I've whited out the names and actually showed them. And one was a middle school coach for me years ago, showed them the evaluations without the players' names. And I said, I would never do this, but you've backed me into a corner. And this is what your son is, what his teammates think about him right now as his personality. They kind of think he's a ball hog and this and this. And both times it's worked out great. I don't like doing it, and I don't know if that really answers your question, but there's different ways to handle parents, and you got to let them. The number one way is just sit there and let them talk. If they can talk, and I have a 24-hour rule, I will not speak to you 24 hours after a game because
Right.
if you're mad and we won, then if you want to talk to me, I'm going to be mad at you because you're not happy that we won. And if we lost, I'm going to be mad. So that's not a good situation for either one of us. And
Right.
so I do have that rule. And it's just, I mean, I've been escorted off the court with police, and so has my family because a parent was mad at me and wanted to beat me up. And that's
Mm.
in my book too. So
Right.
that's, um, yeah, it's, and I invited him in. I said, let's talk basketball. If you think you know basketball, draw it out. Show me something. And I opened the door for him. But as far as one single answer, I don't, I, that's kind of why I wished there were times I wished I would have went on to college. Had a couple opportunities, but because in college they don't care. You don't,
Yeah.
if your kid
Yeah.
doesn't play in college, coach
Yep.
isn't going to sit down and listen to you.
Yep.
He's just going to say, yeah, whatever.
Right.
I got whole Northwest to recruit from. I'll just bring
Yep.
another kid in.
Yep.
So
So,
if you ever find an answer, keep me in mind. We'll write a
well,
book.
I mean, you kind of, I think you hit it for the most part. I think being as open as you can and as honest as you can with the parents, it goes a lot farther. I've seen coaches where they are hyping up, telling the parents they're hyping up this kid. And I'm like, what are you trying to sell them? And I think sometimes they're not completely honest with them. And that's where I think you get this distrust between parents and coaches, where I think if you can just be as honest as you can, I think that is going to help the coach out a lot more if they can show that honesty. And so when you bring up the evaluation, especially when you're putting who they are as a person as a priority versus their athletic ability, that's important too, because I think kids sometimes and parents, they see, well, my kid could sit here at the 3 point line and go 10 for 10. Great.
Under pressure, though?
Under pressure, or he might be great, but he's not passing his classes. He's a freaking jerk. He's late to school all the time. You don't want that on your team. I've
Right.
made that mistake before where I had this kid that was great, but he ended up being a cancer and it affected the culture and everything that was going on in the locker room. And that was a hard lesson to learn. So I like the idea of those intangibles being emphasized, especially when you're doing your
Right.
evaluation.
And I ran into that. It's my favorite story to tell. I always tell it when I speak. And before I came to Twin, I was coaching baseball in Burley, and we had our two best players were not doing anything. They wouldn't run. They were just, and cancer's a bad word, but they didn't respect our system. They didn't, our culture, nothing. And we only had 13 guys. And I brought a basketball player. He wanted to play. And I told him, don't even come out. His name's Randy. He said, Randy, don't even come out for baseball. We're pretty serious about our baseball. And he goes, and I was a head basketball coach too. So, and he just a super kid. And he goes, I don't want to play. I just want to be around the guys. And I go, okay, you can come out because sometimes that doesn't work either. But ended up working. But we had to kick these two guys off, and they had two very influential parents in the community in Burley. And but we went to our AD and principal and said, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to rock the boat. Well, the first half of the season, the parents were mad because they thought we destroyed the season, and we were bad. And I said this the other last week that our infield wouldn't even qualify to ride the good rides at Lagoon. We were so short that, I mean, we weren't very good. We went to state we ended up getting to state, and Randy had to play, and he struck out 12 of his first 13 times. And we go to state, and we're playing the best team in the state, the 4A state championship or a semifinal game, and their pitchers get a 4th-round draft pick. And there was no way we were going to win that game. But Randy came up with the bases loaded, so I called him down. I said, Randy, he's going to throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. Just hit it. Just swing. And he hit it and scored. The next day we played in the state championship. He hit a pop fly, I gave him a take signal, and he still swung at the ball. And he came back, and I go, that's a take sign. You don't swing at 3-0 pitches. And this is the 5th inning of the state championship game. And he goes, Coach, I don't know any of the signs the whole year. He didn't know one sign in baseball the whole year. I was just started. I was mad at him, but I thought, oh, okay. And we ended up winning the state title with an 11-13 record. But it all came back to, hey, this is how we're going to do it here. And if your parents aren't buying in and you're not buying in, and those kids weren't even close. Usually you can talk to the kids, but they had done so much stuff that we just let them go. So I always like to tell that story. And there's a lot of funny things that happened that year, but we won with a losing record.
Hey, that's sometimes that happens. So, I mean, you hit the right spot and you get I mean, that's one thing about especially baseball and basketball. It's not necessarily how you start, but it's how you finish. And you can hit that hot
Right.
streak right at the right moment. And baseball's a funny sport. Our daughter played softball, so we
And
kind of
it's,
understand that. You just get hot right when you
yeah,
need
there's a
to.
lot to it.
Yeah. Common mistakes parents make uh, with their children when they're facing adversity. I think most coaches kind of know this, but I kind of want your take on this about what you see the mistakes parents are making when their kids are facing something difficult, but it's not life threatening. Sports aren't life threatening. There's nothing in danger for this kid, but yet they feel like they got to somehow ease it out a little bit for them. How, what are some of the things you're seeing that the parents are doing that are hindering their kids from being successful ultimately?
Well, they're the adults. I said adults are changing the environment, and the parents are. just like the cookies and milk for the kids that lose a big game. And the parents, I don't think they mean well, but they're not letting their kids. You have to let your kids fail. If they're going to fail, let them fail, and then see what they do afterwards. And I say it 15 times during the season. Is your judge, your true character comes out when the chips are down. We talked about that earlier, and the parents are not seeing it that way. My kid's down. What can I do to bring him back up? Well, I think just leave them alone. If they want to come talk to you, talk to them. Obviously, love them. Do all the stuff you need to do as a parent, but let them pull themselves through. I don't know how many times my assistants have told me to call a timeout during a game when our team was just getting beat by 50. And we go on a 0 for 15 run and we're getting killed. And they go, you need to call a timeout. And I go, this game doesn't mean a whole lot. I go, we're not calling a timeout. These kids need to figure it out. So later in the year, when we don't have any timeouts, they can pull through it. But then you have parents now that are yelling from the stands, call a timeout, call a time. And they don't know they don't know the culture, so to speak. And if there's one thing that they can do, it's just sit back. And I yell during game. It's so much easier to coach from the bleachers. I have to sit clear up top of my daughters who are playing and my son because I would yell and I would evaluate coaches. I still do. I'm friends with the Twin Falls coach and a lot of the coaches around here. And evaluate's a little tough term. I just say I would do it this way versus that way. But that's life. They would do it to me and I expect it. Heck, my wife does it to me. I come home and she says, why did you do that? Goodness, I'm getting that all the game long. And now I come home and I get it from you. So if they could just sit back and do their best to enjoy the small time they have with their kids in high school athletics, that they'll find out that it's just so much easier for them and their kids and the coaches and then they can be the ambassadors for the program down the road.
I think it's an important lesson for anybody, especially parents, that it's okay to struggle. There's a lot of good that comes from a struggle, and it can be struggling and then experiencing failure, and it can be struggling and experiencing success. But without the struggle, you wouldn't get those experiences. And I think that struggle is super important, that we parents seem to want to shield their kids from, but that's what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think for me, it's, that struggle. And when you do find success, that feeling, there is nothing that beats that feeling.
Because you did it yourself.
Yeah. And unfortunately, see parents, sometimes they try to make it as easy as possible for their kid. And that's detrimental and it's hurting them. And when they get out in the real world, their boss, mom and dad ain't going to come on and say, oh, can you, be easy on my kid, because the boss is going to be like, no.
Don't yell at him for being late.
Don't yell at him for being late, please.
I can't stand being late. That's my biggest.
Yep.
Be on time.
I did it just 2 weeks ago in class. I had students, I go, you give me one profession on earth that you can be late to every day and late with your documentation or you can be late on deadlines every time and still be successful. And, high school kids can talk your head off and they have an answer for everything, but they couldn't answer that one.
I bet not.
Because they get mad at me because I'm working party.
Yep. I pose the same question to the kids all the time. It's like, you're going to have due dates in life, man. And if you can't get this paper in, it's like, you think the bill collectors are going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, you forgot your bill.
Yeah.
No, they're going to take your car.
And I have a kid in class that he's smart and he's going to go to work at McDonald's this summer. But I battled with him all year on late papers and it's kind of become a joke. And I go, all right, you're going to do your first day at McDonald's. Somebody's going to order a hamburger. Now, you can't give them the hamburger if they order it on Friday. You can't get it to them on Tuesday because that's late. That's how late you are with all your work. So you're going to get fired and they don't care what your parents think.
Right. What can lessons teach us, or excuse me, what lessons do consequences teach us that success can't? So we kind of touched on that. What do consequences teach us that are really important versus always finding that success?
First thing that comes to my mind is how you define success. How do you, when I get on coaching podium or whatever on the playing field, to me, success is could be different for every kid. So yeah, there's not a season that goes by I don't believe we can't win a state championship. So, but are you asking how I tell the difference between the consequences and success,
Well,
or how do
yeah.
they help?
So, well, you know, let's look at it wins versus losses because it seems like for me, I always learn more from losses, and I remember those losses sometimes, especially in big situations, more than I'll ever the wins. Even though there are certain wins that stick with you, sometimes it seems like the losses always stick with you a little bit more. So, what can we learn from that? I guess, and stuff like that. Maybe that may be a better way of putting it.
Well, I think that's where athletics is great when it comes to teaching kids in the classroom. You should not be a good coach and not be a good teacher. I think that follows suit with everything when it comes to consequences and building leaders. And it's kind of a tough question to answer because it's so broad, because you really have to take each kid and what is a success for one kid or a consequence for this kid versus a consequence for another kid, and then how they handle it. What's their success? If this kid ends up starting a game, is that the pinnacle of his high school career versus a kid that's been there the whole time and winning a state title? And I don't know if I'm answering your question on
No,
consequences,
no,
but they have to
you're good.
have them. You have to have the consequences, because if you don't, and I see too many coaches do this with the what I call them punch and cookies. If you don't have consequences, then what's the purpose of coaching? And I think the purpose of coaching is preparing them for life. And I know I have people that there was a kid on Facebook last week on my Facebook page that still has a grudge. And he says I should have won 15 state titles at Twin because I had so many great athletes. And
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah,
right,
you're right. I didn't respond because I don't respond to them. But
right.
when people say that, I go, "You're right." Because I'm tough. I'm just like you. I remember all the losses. We lost a lot of games in the semifinals, and I remember the losses. But what you remember, you're not going to do that again. And unfortunately for those kids that came through, they don't get a chance to see that. And like you said, your wife's a teacher, and I do stuff different all the time in classes. Sometimes I just throw up my hands and say, "This project I've never done in my life, and we're going to quit it right now because it's not working." you
Right.
know? So you got to try new things. But what I'm getting at is it doesn't matter to that group of kids right then and there, but down the road it will, if that makes any sense. But
It totally makes sense.
I still believe, yeah, yeah.
I think
35
that's the
years of coaching,
perfect
yeah, I think I should have won 30 state championships. That's just my personality.
I think that's the perfect answer to that is were those consequences and were those things they learned and the successes, whatever they might be to those students, did they help them be better prepared for life? Did they make them a better person?
Yes.
And we talk about it all the time. And you've got to be physical. I'm not sure what you coach, but it doesn't matter what you coach, maybe not golf, but you have to be you have to be physical. And I always ask my guys, especially when I had some soft teams at Twin Falls and our rival was Jerome for a while, and I would say, "What would you do if you were taking a girl to prom and a kid from Jerome came over and wanted to steal your girlfriend from her?" I mean, would you just say, "Okay, go ahead, take her"? No, you would probably stand up and fight, and that's what we got to do on the basketball court or on the baseball field. Kids got to toughen up nowadays, and it's got to come from home. That's my belief, and that's the belief of a lot of coaches now. And I bet you believe the same thing. Is they are pretty soft, but I'm not blaming the kids. I'm blaming more of the environment, like I've said before.
Okay. Um, so we're gonna wrap things up here in a minute here, but for me, talking about success and stuff like that and consequences, for me, success, I've always looked at it as a coach, as a broader sense. The wins are nice, and I remember coaching in Oregon in football. and being a part of coaching staff and some players that school hadn't experienced being in the playoffs for 20 years and being able to be a part of that and be able to get that team to a playoff game and be one of the top defenses and being a part of that defensive staff. That was amazing. And then being able to go back to back and do it again the following year, stuff like that really sticks out. And then I think about the not so successful years that I had and stuff like that where things didn't go well. And sometimes when I started out in my profession, when I started out coaching, looking back now, it's like, yeah, I wasn't ready yet. Or, I definitely know more now what I shouldn't have done then, just taking, those experiences. But for me, the success that when I'm looking at success, and I'm sure you do the same, is when you have those kids come back and you see them being fathers and mothers and they're finding their happiness and whatever it is. And just that sport just happened to be something to help build them who they are as a person. And it's a great thing, a rite of passage into adulthood. I think sports can be to make these kids into better people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. When they come back and say, "Hey, coach, how you doing?" It's a great, and I see that they're a happy father or a mother, or they're doing what they love to
Yeah.
do. Yep.
That's the awesome part. That's when I coached in Burley, 80% of the kids were LDS. And I'm Catholic, so that usually growing up that wasn't a very good combination, but they were awesome in Burley. And I think I went to more farewells and more church services at the LDS church than I did my own church because of my players. And I did it because they were leaving for 2 years on their mission. And those guys come back even today and walk in my classroom. And you're exactly right. That's the best part about coaching right there. You can take state championships, you can take all the wins, but when your kids are coming back to see you or messaging you on Facebook or whatever social media is out there, or they contact you, that's when you know you're doing your job. I mean, you can rack up 8 state championships, and if a kid never comes back and talks to you, then I don't know that your career was considered a success in my eyes.
Right. Yep. Okay. We're gonna swing back. We'll give you closing thoughts here at the end, but there's one other segment that we always do on the show, and it's called the mascot of the week. And so the mascot of the week is we always look at unusual mascots from around the country, different high schools. Sometimes we'll do minor league baseball or hockey, and we will talk about kind of the origin of their name. So we've done Orofino, we've done the Maniacs, we've done the Bin Lava Bears,
I was
did
just
the
thinking about that. Yeah.
yeah, we did the Yuma Criminals. Yeah, and so there's a town called Polka, and their mascot's the Dots. So we've gone around. I've done these different schools. So this is taking us to Edgemont, South Dakota. And when you think of this mascot, I want you to really think about it, and I'll tell you the origins of the story here. But I'm going to give you the name of the mascot first, and I want you to tell me what you think it's related to. So they are called the Edgemont Moguls.
Moguls?
Moguls.
Like
Moguls.
ski moguls?
Okay.
That's what I was thinking.
So both of you guys' brains are going to skiing. Okay. And we're looking at South Dakota, which I don't know much about South Dakota. I mean, they got the Black Hills, and I don't know how much skiing is going on the Black Hills.
There's not much in South Dakota.
There's probably not much in South Dakota, but let's talk about how this town got started. 1890s. It was a railroad town, and when we're looking at this, it's a small town, 140 students, K-12, and it is still built around the industry of railroad. Yep. A mogul is a train, like a choo-choo train. Yes. So when when they were pushing west with the railroad and stuff like that through South Dakota, this is where it came from. And it's not off of some rich man. It was a tribute to the machine and the people that built the community from the ground up. So their mascot's a locomotive. It was,
But they couldn't have been the locomotives. That would have made sense.
moguls. It's a particular type of train that they had. So, yeah. So accomplishments and culture.
That's cool.
This isn't a place that you're going to find massive title runs. It doesn't look like they've had a lot of sports success and stuff like that. It is kind of a gateway to the Black Hills. So it kind of carries that tourism type of thing. It's a small Western feel to the town. Teddy Roosevelt visited back in 1903. That's something claim to fame. Ranching, agriculture, small businesses, cost of living is pretty low. So what's nice about the mascot, it's not flashy, but it brings a sense of strength, endurance, history, and community identity.
That's pretty cool. I like
Yeah.
it.
So that's your mascot of the week.
That is.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So, Coach, I'm going to give you the last word here. A little closing for you, the closing thoughts. What's one message you want your listeners to take from your book?
The one message I think is keep pushing forward. I think that, and learn from your mistakes. If there's a message in coaching, that would probably be the one, is whatever life experience you have, learn from it. If it's in coaching, if it's in another profession, mine happen to be coaching, but learn from your mistakes and make your life better. I mean, do what you love and make your life better. And in order to do that, you've got to learn from your mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Coach, thanks a lot for joining us on the show. I appreciate it for you taking your time.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. And we'll stay connected for sure. That's it for today's show.
Okay.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And please stay tuned for future episodes. Thanks a lot, guys.